They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send him out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this to the town and the countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. And when they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. And then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And all the people were amazed. This is the word of the Lord.
So here we are at the end of another year. And typically at this time of year, people start to think about the next year and start to wonder what is 2026 gonna bring for us. And I find that this question raises more anxiety in people than it used to. 10 years ago, maybe not 10 years ago, when people asked that, they weren't all that anxious, but it seems to me that today people are more anxious about what's coming. With all the craziness going on in our world, and people are anxious. The story that Sharon just read speaks to this very situation in our lives. This story is not about Jesus destroying a bunch of pigs because the Old Testament forbid the eating of pork. No, this is a story about Jesus being in control. Just with a word, he takes on Satan and the most powerful forces in the world and destroys them. The lesson of this story is that we don't need to be afraid of what will happen to us in 2026 because Jesus is more powerful than Satan and he's more powerful than the forces of this world. This story takes place in the Decapolis, Gentile territory on the southeast side of the Sea of Galilee. Now, the Gospel of Mark was written probably about 35 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so its first readers would have been alive. Many of its first readers would have been alive when Jesus died and rose again. They would be living under the persecution of Nero. Nero was emperor, and he was hunting down and killing Christians. And just before or just after the book was written, the Romans attacked Jerusalem, burned down the temple. And so many of the first readers of the book of Mark would be familiar with what was going on. Now let me explain to you what this story would mean to them. 2,000 pigs in the Decapolis, first century Palestine. This was Gentile territory, as we said, in Jesus' day. Now that's a very large herd of pigs. It was a massive swine operation, even by today's standards. That's a lot of bacon. In ancient farming practices, pigs were typically kept in a sty housing about a dozen pigs, maybe 2 dozen. But just watering a dozen pigs in Palestine in those days, in this arid climate, would have taken away a lot of water from the village, let alone the grain that would be required to feed them all. Pig farming wasn't really a sustainable operation in first century Palestine. And a herd of 2,000 pigs would be a near ecological disaster for a region. Who owned these pigs? Who could afford to take care of them? And what would they do with them all? It would take the resources of an army to care for them. It would take an army to consume them. Well, it just so happens that in Jesus' day, and the days when Mark was writing this, the years that followed Mark's writing, there just happened to be an army in this region. The Decapolis was the headquarters for an entire legion of Roman soldiers. And it was no ordinary legion. It was the famous the Roman 10th Legion, or in Latin, Legio X. Mark's audience would know Legio X well. 2,000 years later, we still know about them, about their atrocities. They were infamous. It was the 10th Legion that destroyed the monastery at Qumran. In the last-ditch effort to save their work, the monks hid their scrolls in caves by the Dead Seas. What we now know as the Dead Sea Scrolls, well, the 10th Legion wiped those guys out. It was the 10th Legion that destroyed Jerusalem and burned down the temple. It was the 10th Legion that was in 70 AD. In 71 AD, they're the ones who surrounded Masada and killed all the Jews on top of there and brought the Jewish-Roman war to an end. After the war, they were the ones who were left in charge of Jerusalem and controlling Jerusalem and keeping the peace of Rome over Jerusalem. This is no ordinary army. This is the 10th Legion. The army encamped in the Decapolis during the events of Mark chapter 5. These were their pigs. Roman soldiers throughout the empire were given a daily ration of food of 1 pound of meat a day. And you guessed it, primarily pork. This herd was destined to be destroyed by a legion of Roman soldiers or a legion of demons. With Jesus' actions, the 10th Legion's food supply has been affected. The Roman legion camping in the Decapolis feels the effect of King Jesus coming into their region. They lose ground and they lose their food supply to this invading king. But that's not all, there's more. Like sports teams today or military units today, the 10th Legion had a mascot. They used this mascot. The legions had printed their own coins that they used to buy and sell things within their camp. They had banners that they carried as they marched into battle. When they won, they built these arches or monuments to themselves, and these arches or monuments had this mascot on them. What do you think their mascot was? none other than the pig or the boar. And here's a picture of the coins they used in their camp. The 10th Legion's mascot was the pig. We're beginning to understand the impact of Jesus' presence in the Decapolis. This is the story of Jesus mocking both Satan and the imperial forces of Rome. And the parallels even go deeper. In verse 13, it says that this herd of pigs rushed down the bank and were drowned in the lake. Did you know that pigs don't stampede? They're an independent lot. They normally just scatter. For them to rush together is unusual. Now, the word that's used for herd is the same word that's used to describe a group of military trainees. And the word that's used to mean rush down the hill means marched. And so this is no longer just a wild group of pigs running around. This is an army marching itself into the Sea of Galilee, which carries a huge political parallel in the Bible. Can you think of another army that God destroyed by marching it into the ocean or into the sea? How about the Exodus? God marched the Egyptian army into the Red Sea. What does God say the Exodus is all about? There's the 10 plagues. Each one of the plagues is aimed at one of the gods of Egypt. And it demonstrates that God is more powerful than the gods of Egypt. For example, the plague of darkness. The Egyptians worshipped Re, the god of the sun. And with that plague, God is showing that he is more powerful than Re, the god of Egypt. After all the plagues, God destroys the Egyptian army by marching it into the sea. What first century God follower would hear about these pigs marching into, these Roman army pigs marching down into the sea, and not think of what God did by destroying the Egyptian army? The victory of Jesus in this story is total. He humiliates the world's strongest fighting force with absolute ease. With a simple command, he drowns a mighty army in the sea. The demonic forces in this story are powerful. They held this poor man captive for many years with tremendous suffering. This legion was powerful, but Jesus is more powerful. Nero and his forces, the Roman legions, were hunting down and killing Christians. They were powerful, very powerful. But Jesus is more powerful. Isn't that good news? That was kind of pathetic. Isn't that good news? It is good news. It is. There's more to the story, though. The swine herders gather the community, and their reaction is fear. And I can understand that. A legion has been cast out. The symbol of imperial power has been shaken. Their world is turned upside down simply because Jesus has come into their area. Who's going to explain to the Roman soldiers what happened to all his bacon? Do you see why they asked Jesus to leave before he can cause more trouble? Jesus has the ability to defeat legions and free the oppressed. True peace has come to the Decapolis. And even more, the tables have been turned. The invaded become the invader. the demonized man, is sent back into the Decapolis to tell the people about how much Jesus has done for him. The invaded become the invader. He is sent back to the Decapolis to proclaim the invasion of King Jesus. He goes back not to tell what Lord Caesar has done for him, the commander of legions, but rather to say what Lord Jesus Christ has done, that he has the true power. All competing empires and governments are a joke and don't stand a chance against Jesus. Okay, so now we understand what this story meant to the people who read it in the first century, people who were facing persecution by Nero. And it gives us tremendous hope. It means that Jesus is greater than anything that's going to come against us in 2026. The guy at work who's trying to get you fired, cancer and old age is trying to kill you, your ex who's making your life miserable, your past sins that you can't forgive yourself for, the turmoil and pain and confusion and misery that's in your life right now. Jesus is greater than all of these things. Now, that doesn't guarantee that the guy at work won't get you fired. It doesn't mean that you're not going to die from cancer. It doesn't mean that your ex is going to be a pain in your butt for the rest of your life, and so on. But you see, our hope is not found in things to go well here in this life. Our hope is in Jesus' return to set everything right. And Jesus is powerful enough that all the legions that are arranged against you, he can handle them all. That's our message. Satan, beware. Jesus has risen from the dead, and he rules in power. Now let me conclude by reading for you from Colossians chapter 2. This is the Phillips translation. God has forgiven you all your sins. Christ has utterly wiped out the damning evidence of broken laws and condemned and commandments which always hung over our heads, and has completely annulled it by nailing it over his own head on the cross. And then, having disarmed all the powers ranged against us, he exposed them, shattered, empty, and defeated in his final glorious triumphant act. Jesus, our King, is more powerful than all the forces that want to come against us in 2026. Isn't that good news? Again, kind of pathetic, but I guess that's our shtick today. I think we got lots to celebrate. And so I asked Joe to end our service. If it gets loud, don't blame him, blame me. I told him, knock our socks off. We got a lot to celebrate. Our King Jesus is more powerful than Satan. Our King Jesus is more powerful than anything that can come against us. In all the craziness of this world, our Jesus is stronger. That's good news.